Welcome to 10 for 10, a series of interviews with personalities and dedicated leaders across the Major Arena Soccer League, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. I'm your host, Eric Bergrud. For this week's episode, I am joined by Ryan Cigich, the MASL's head of officials. Welcome to 10 for 10, Ryan.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
I'm well.
Good.
I
Good
am
to
well.
be here.
Hey, I haven't seen you in person for a while, so this is great. So here's my first question. Ryan, you began your professional indoor soccer refereeing career in 1999 in the late great National Professional Soccer League. How has refereeing evolved since then?
Oh, well, remember when I started back then, that was still the infancy of Major League Soccer and the A-League. So, many of us, including many players, were going back and forth between indoor and outdoor. And that was just the norm then. Now a referee in MLS is full-time under contract. So there's only a limited time of year that they can work. And there's obviously no players that are crossing over now. So, back then you had the very top and most talented world-class referees and world-class players alike that came to indoor because that was the top level of competition. And I was, really lucky back then to get the opportunity to get in at such a young age. And, quite frankly, for a lot of people, including myself, this game is just addictive. So that's how that all started. But in the days when I first started, we, refereed more, I think, by feel for the game. So it was oftentimes referred to as back then, like you could bend that rule book as much as you wanted for practicality standpoints. Like we didn't focus on being as technical back then. Now it's much more technical. From the rules, laws of the game standpoint, they're followed much more closely. I think the evolution over time with technology has tremendously changed officiating, both for good and bad. I mean, this instantaneous video now that, video can prove whether or not you got a call right, even real tight judgment, subjective calls. And, if you have to go frame by frame to determine if a call is right, then can you really say that it's wrong if it's that close? So, back when I started, even a big call that happened, you'd have to wait until Monday until the team got the video before they even saw it. And then they'd clip it and send it in. And maybe by Wednesday, you'd get to see it. And by that time, everything was long and forgotten about because everyone had moved on and focused on their next game. So, now it's just instantaneous. It's evolved where coaches, players, fans, everybody sees things immediately, even before we do. We have to make a call immediately where everyone else gets to look at it first. So that's changed. And then, finally, I think the evolution with social media and, just the negativity and at times downright, meanness and rudeness of people just have changed a lot about what we do. I think in all sports, it's just created so much more pressure and a lot of referees asking themselves in all sports, like, hey, why do I really do this?
Yeah, no, I get that. So speaking of videos, 19 years ago, you and Ron Corey officiated one of the most famous or infamous games in indoor soccer history, and I was recently watching the clip on YouTube. What lessons did you learn from the March 2005 Cleveland Forest Chicago Storm brawl?
Oh, man. Well, I had just moved to Chicago from Oklahoma, and, we didn't get much snow in Oklahoma, but I remember walking into the UIC arena it was cold and maybe some flurries, but no snow. And then walking out like 4 or 5 hours later, and it was like a blizzard. You couldn't even see in front of you. But as far as the game goes, it was just one of those crazy games where it seemed like no matter what you did or we did as a referee, it just didn't matter. The players just weren't responding really to anything that you tried to do to control the game. And, I think what I learned from that game is that sometimes that's just the way that the game could be. I think it's funny sometimes when I hear from, players or fans or coaches, well, the referee, they lost control of the game. Well, maybe, but, no, at some point, I think the players can lose control of themselves. And while as a referee, we are a huge, big part of controlling a game, keeping players safe, all that good stuff. But don't always blame the referee. I think players at times are also responsible for acting as professionals and controlling themselves. And I think that gets lost.
So for a few seasons now, MASL referees have worn numbers on the back of their shirts. What was the inspiration for your number 2?
I mean, nothing really of that importance. I mean, just a number as a player, and then a big hockey fan, Kerry Fraser, which was a longtime top referee in the NHL. I always really thought he managed the game just tremendously. That was his number. And quite frankly, I wanted number 7, but Brian Miller threw a fit, so I had to give him 7, and I took 2.
That's a great story. So in your role with the league, what factors do you consider when you are making referee assignments?
It's like a big puzzle, Eric. So, team matchups are looked at, personality of coaches and players. Does that match up with the personality of the referee? How do the two referees work together? Do they match up well? There's availability, travel distance, travel costs. How many times have you seen this team or that team? Oh, by the way, there's budget. Travel isn't cheap these days. So all that kind of goes into it. Teams are not permitted to scratch or say they don't want this referee or that one. But at the same time, if I know a team doesn't want a referee or, me or whomever for whatever the reason, it's like, why does the referee want to go back there? So, maybe the referee doesn't want to see the team and deal with them just as much as the team may not want to deal with that particular person either. So.
Can you describe for our viewers the league's approach today to referee assessment and development?
Well, it's a work in progress. I like to give a new referee at least 10 games to determine if they have the potential to learn the differences of the game and are they going to be effective at it. The great coach Danny Kelly told me once that, he thinks a player needs at least 50 games before they really start to even get it. I don't think that's any difference, for us. But, through that time, games are evaluated. We have, training webinars, review, video. Look at a lot of video or calls made correctly, incorrectly. We always try to look at why something was incorrectly called. There's almost always a reason, and it typically is not just incompetence, as vocal minority would at times like you to believe. But, we've also have our training combines. That is a common occurrence now, thanks to Keith. So all that plays into it.
How has the inclusion of FIFA referees affected the quality of officiating across the league?
Well, yeah, we have a very experienced roster with high level soccer accomplishments, competitions. In fact, if you compare the overall level of experience and accomplishments of our referees, I think it far outweighs the overall level of experience and accomplishments of the players. And I in no way say that to mean that in any sort of condescending or arrogant or negative way toward anyone, because we do have some extremely talented players, but it's just a matter of fact. I'll put our roster and our ability and talent level up against any other league other than MLS. We're much better than what people give us credit for.
Earlier this season, the league experimented with a 3-referee system. Can you describe your experience calling games in the 3-referee system?
It's got a ton of potential. I think it's the way of the future. Again, when we went into it, we did it not knowing what we didn't know. So every week we seemed to learn some things from it and say, hey, we should now, not do it this way or do it that way. Personally, and most of the referees liked it and thought it was more beneficial than what we had originally expected. If it were to become permanent, I think it will need a lot more formal training and much more fine tuning with it. I think in the short term, it's going to come down to, is the additional cost needed to implement it going to provide the level of benefit, to justify the cost? And that's kind of above me.
Couple more questions for you, Ryan. Has co-hosting MASL Under Review with Phil Levanco changed your perspective as the league's head of officials and as a referee yourself?
Well, Eric, the whole objective of that show is meant to educate and inform everybody. That's the players, the coaches, referees, fans, etc. It's to educate and inform on our rules, how referees look at things and their decision-making process. My intent with it is not always to say this is 100% right by all means. It's me giving my opinion, and oftentimes the opinion of a committee that I have that I send these plays to and say, what do you think? Because a lot of them are tight judgment calls, and we make a determination. So everyone can obviously still have and should have their opinion, regardless of what I say the quote answer is. That's kind of the beauty of soccer. And I think, secondly, it's meant to provide a level of transparency when things maybe could have been called differently, which is also a learning opportunity. Which, by the way, there's no other league out there that I know of that provides that level of transparency, to people. I mean, MLS has their, whatever they call that, but that's not anybody in an official capacity speaking on it. And then finally, I say it's entertainment. It's an entertaining segment because, going back to what I said earlier, people like controversy, and everyone thinks they're a referee. So this gives people visibility into what they actually think that the call should have been.
Right. Final question. If you had to pick your favorite moment of the MASL's first 10 years, what would it be and why?
I really don't have one. I mean, so much, has gone into, especially the last, 10 years with it. But, some of those early Milwaukee, Kansas City games were just so entertaining. The Sonora final, whatever year that was, just the atmosphere there, the level of play. I can't pick to just one, quite frankly. So
it's a tough question. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Ryan, and thanks to each of you for joining us. We will be back soon with another 10 for 10 interview.